But he's also in Cinderella, which I know me saying that makes it. It's just a weird thing to hear, but he's in
Why we got to
Cinderella.
start out like this, Ben? Why we got to start out like this, dude?
I mean,
Why didn't you just scroll down to the bottom where the black and white movies are, and then tell us which ones you recognize?
That's the standout for Ben. One of the live-action Disney movies.
That's actually a legitimately good live-action Disney movie.
I don't believe you. I don't know.
Okay, it's legitimately the best, and not just the best of that lot. I think it's better than a lot of Disney movies.
Just so we could catch up the fans, though, just real quick, right? I want to let you know that the start of this conversation was Stellan Skarsgård. Wasn't he Pennywise? Thank you. Okay.
I don't know. I've never seen the movie. I never saw it.
Stellan has like 3 sons, and they're all.
He has like 8 sons, and like 3 of them are actors.
3 sons in Hollywood.
Yeah, Alexander Skarsgård, mostly known from True Blood. And then Bill Skarsgård did it, and then
Pennywise. Yeah.
I don't remember the other one. He was in Vikings. I can't remember his name.
Gustav.
Oh, right.
That one. Yeah. Okay, but really, Stellan Skarsgård is great at being a villain and being Harkonnen, the baby worm.
He's pretty good at being.
Let's not bottle up his. Yeah, thank you. I was like, let's not bottle up his career. Like he's great in a lot of things, and apparently a little bit of a chameleon because like we were going through his IMDb and we're like, shit, he was in that. Like, I mean, they're older movies, right? So it's been a real long time since I've seen Hunt for Red October, but that's not one of the ones that jumps out at you. Like,
he was really good in the Chernobyl TV series,
right? Yeah, I mean, he's done
Girl with Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah,
and he's the bad version of the girl in the Dragon Tattoo. But yes, he's good in it.
I think he was by far the best in Dune, though. As far as the movies I've seen.
Out of all 3 of them that you saw, one of them being it that you confused, he was really good in Dune. So,
but I feel like he was the only choice in a way. I'm sure there's other people who could have done Baron Harkonnen well, but I feel like Stellan Skarsgård is the best choice for that character, just to carry the weirdness and the evilness. And there was a tidbit I heard the director, I don't know how to say his name, so I'm really scared to say.
Dennis?
Denis.
I don't know. French is weird. There's a tidbit that Stellan Skarsgård signed on because he wanted it to be practical effects, and so did Denis. And it took 8 hours of makeup a day to put that on him, and then they could start shooting.
Yeah, but it's okay because he was hovering the whole time, so it's not like he was sitting in a chair or something. But
do we have anyone here who disagrees that the 2021 version of Dune is a perfect movie or not?
So, all right. So let's get into it, right? Because this is what we were talking about like a month ago when a bunch of us saw it when it first hit, HBO Max and whatever. But so Dune is a perfect movie compared to like the books, right? In my opinion, right? Like this dude, since he was 12, only wanted to be a director so that he could do this. And on his way, he stumbled his way through Arrival and Blade Runner 2049 so he could get good enough to do Dune. Okay? Like, if that's not a fucking story, talk about a man who's driven by, sheer force of will, like that sort of thing, right? And I got to tell you, like, it's been a couple years since I read the book, and like I started listening to it, barely got my toe dipped into it by comparison. This shit is spot on, right? But there are definitely some things where I was concerned about it appealing to a wider audience, right? And so, like, my buddy and I were watching it, and the whole time we're like, squee, but shit, because they didn't have Dune 2 on, or Dune Part 2, whatever, on the hook yet. So the whole time we're like, oh my God, I hope this does well enough that we actually get the second half of the movie, right? So from like a book adaptation, from, imagery, they fucking put in the shields. Like, I knew when I watched the trailer and you see the shields during the sparring scene, I was like, oh my God, please do a good job, because that's the kind of detail that Lord of the Rings should have had. And even though the armies were digitally added, I'm still bitching about that 20 years later. They fucking digitally added the armies and they still couldn't do it right. Dune doesn't have that problem, right? Mm-hmm. There's hardly anything in Dune where I'm like, wait a minute, that's not how it was in the books. Wait a minute, why didn't they do this? Because he specifically wanted it to be a faithful adaptation, right?
Right. So there were a couple things I was able to notice that were deviations from a little bit from the book and a little bit from the 1984 version, which I sat through and I hated, blah, 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 whatever.
That's not ever going to come out the rest of the episode.
Never. So, it's not half of my notes. But some of those choices were good. He improved on it, I would say. Right. They made minor changes. The opening. So the opening of the book and the 1984 version start with kind of an info dump and the Reverend Mother harassing Paul. They did the Gom Jabbar thing right up front. But the 2021, it allows there's the kind of the info dump of Arrakis, and you can kind of see Chani in that way. That's really cryptic. And then there's the morning breakfast with his mother. You kind of have a chance to get to know Paul and who he is before he's on the defensive with the Reverend Mother. Because that's the first thing you see of him. He just comes off as a whiny, petulant child. But when you get a sense of what he is as a person before then, it allows him a better meeting point. It's a better first impression. So that was a very good choice.
Okay. I remembered a thing. I'm going to try and keep this in my mind for later, but go ahead.
Okay. That was the biggest thing that was a deviation, I'd say, from the book, because it's just a very weird point to start off at any point, because the only thing you see, it's like he's talking about, like, why would you do this to a duke's son? Why would you speak so badly to a duke's concubine? And Paul is just constantly going back to the fact that their relationship to Leto. But in 2021, he's like, you would dare speak to my mother in her own house that way.
Right.
They did minor changes that allow the characters to stand on their own worth a little bit more.
Sure.
And it's some of the changes of Paul didn't want to speak about his dreams to Jessica. He was cagey about it to his mother, but he wanted to speak about the dreams to Idaho because he felt like, one, it's his friend, and he wants to save his friend. So his values are being shown more, and he's acting more like a real teenager would, of not wanting to speak about the thing to his parent. And the book and 1984 just is like, yep, dreams. Let's dive into that info dump of whatever that means.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on whether you like what Frank Herbert's doing. And as a reader of Dune, when I first read the book and a half of the series, which tells you how much I liked it, which is not as much as I thought I wanted to. I would say that Dune has kind of it's just kind of a weird concept. I know that it's super popular, but I think that the movie is an improvement in many ways. I think the world building is more satisfying and more elegantly told, and for largely, I'm appreciating it largely because of the reasons you say, as well as the reasons I was personally thinking of. So I absolutely agree. I think the 2021 version is a masterpiece in show don't tell. In many ways, there is some info dumping, but there's so much that's just shown and is part of the background and just happens, and you just figure it out on your own, just visually, just from seeing it, which is great.
Yeah, which for some reason 1984 couldn't get that message, and they had both voiceovers and repeated things and just unnecessary bullshit. To like, did you get the point yet? She wasn't supposed to have a son. They said it 4 times, I think.
It's kind of a big deal, but
in the 1984 version, they tried to do what happens in the books. In a way, the head jumping, the constant thoughts for different people. They tried to implement that in the movie, and it does not work.
Yeah, the voiceover, if they had been more conservative with its uses, it might have worked better. But there were times like you literally did not need to have that voiceover line. So just take it out, and I think it would have been something better. You couldn't tell sometimes if it was a mental thought or if it was dialogue.
Some of that's disconnect from executives, though, right? Too, because it's like 1984, like science fiction only just started becoming a thing for grown-ups because Star Wars only came out a few years ago. Executives still think that all the fans are idiots. So I'm sure, that was an executive decision where they just came in and were like, no, explain it more. Like, explain it harder. Where it's like, I think the people that are watching Dune are probably familiar with the source material, at least at that time, so I don't know. But yeah, I don't want to keep going back to it, so hopefully saying this will get it out of my mind. But like talking about like the attention to detail and the show don't tell is like, so you have a little bit of exposition during the training scene with Gurney Halleck, right, where it's like they're sparring and the slow knife kills best and all of that stuff, but just kind of like showing it again when so major spoilers if you've made it this far, obviously, but just to say it. But like when the Harkonnens and the Sardaukar attack and they're bombing the ships, and like even the bombs like hit the brakes right before they impact the shield and basically just like vibrate their way through, just like that level of detail that you don't get from a lot of other adaptations or movies or anything like that. And it's just such neat stuff. You can tell how the sets were designed, that like they took into account, okay, it's going to get to 140 degrees on a cool day on Arrakis, so we've got really big windows that are really high up, but the walls are also like 4 feet thick to keep the heat off. And just the way that the sets are designed, like there's just such great imagery there. And
I love
bringing
the set
in
design, it was so beautiful.
It's great. And the contrast between showing you Caladan, even though I don't feel like it appeared very much at all in the books, but showing the contrast between Caladan and Arrakis, and just being like, this is what the Atreides did on Caladan a little bit, and this is what they're used to, and how their technology is a little bit, and then just seeing that starkly contrasted with Arrakis, and just there's so many good things about it. So all right, complaint time. Okay, you ready for this? Because I know everybody's on cloud nine, and maybe this will be a fight.
I'm sharpening my pitchfork.
Yeah, no, I liked the actress that they picked for Jessica. I don't like his depiction of Jessica.
I absolutely disagree with you.
Really? So she was a weeping violet for you too in the books in 1984? She just cried all the time?
No. Her fear is really important.
Okay.
And they needed to show that. But they also showed her dealing with it and functioning through it. And that was very important.
Okay. I mean, so I don't mind the fact that during the Gom Jabbar scene, like she's outside and she's panicking like a mother would necessarily. But
which
the
is
entire
also accurate to the book. Like she was panicking, and she was even angry with the Reverend Mother in the book.
Yeah, she was angry, but that's much different than just standing outside and just like curled up into a ball out of anxiety and fear, right? But part of the problem that I have with it is that one of the most famous lines from the book gets delivered in that scene. And instead of being this, mantra of stoicism and everything like that, you basically get, whispered breathing and panicked breaths and all of this stuff. Fear is the mind killer, which is, never how I would have interpreted that line, right? And so it's between some of the scenes later when she's obviously functional because she uses the voice to save them when they're, about to get dumped into the desert and whatever. But then like afterwards, it's like all she can do is sit there and watch Paul, who's 15, do anything. Like, show me the fact that you're just as trained. Like she's not helpless. She's basically a space wizard as far as Dune is concerned, right? Like it's one thing for her not to know like how to navigate the desert and for him to have a couple of tips, but she's literally just sitting there waiting for him to make decisions and shit, and
that is true to the book.
I did not get that interpretation, obviously.
That was one of the things that struck me the most of reading it 12 years ago, was that she had to transition from being the one in charge in a way to being a passenger and watching this thing that she created and her son take off. Mm-hmm. He's leading them through the desert because this is what all of the prophecy of thousands of how many years and people and bloodlines and everything functioning. and it's blossoming in him, and so she has to follow his lead.
Isn't the prophecy fake?
I don't think it's so. It's created, right? It's part of it. Like the Bene Gesserits are doing self-fulfilling prophecy. It's more like it's less a prophecy and more a roadmap to them. But she also went off the beaten path, right? And then my understanding is that Paul actually isn't, you know, the Kisat Sadarak, or isn't the most important part of it. He's you know, the generation prior, right? It's his kid that actually fulfills the prophecy. So
yeah, but like they're all in the grips of it, and it's one thing. So I didn't, in my re-listen of trying to get through the audiobook, which was very, very long, I did not get to the point of being able to discuss it too much. But as the 2021 version shows, that it's kind of like this is a roadmap. This is a path that they are on, and they kind of can't get off. As he's seeing all the visions of the future and the Holy War, and it's terrifying him, he can't get out of it. And he says, someone help me, someone get me out of here. And there is no one. No one could possibly do that. And even if there was someone who would try, fate's going to knock it down. They're going to go through this.
So, but yes and no, right? So in the movie, like, because it's show don't tell, you don't get like a ton of exposition, but literally from the Reverend Mother and some of the other scenes where, you know, she's like, look, bad things are going to happen, obviously, but we've done what we can to help you already, you know? And so like, they've already been like planting the seeds literally. And they mentioned again with the whole Lisan al-Gaib, you know, stuff where it was like, the fact, I think it's Jessica says the line or something. I don't know. It was like 1 a.m. when I rewatched it last night. But, you know, she basically turns it like, oh, that's the Bene Gesserit's doing, right? You know, so you get these little like one-liners they're mixed in with the rest of the scene while you're busy there, just like just loving the gorgeousness and, you know, everything else that's going on while you're trying to digest all of these, you know, alien sounding foreign words and whatnot in the culture. But like they're there, right? Is that the Bene Gesserits are sneaky little fucking spies and manipulators. And they've literally spent, you know, hundreds of years potentially setting this up somehow, because that's how the space magic works in Dune, right? Like you huff this spice and then you can see the pathways between stars. Well, what does that mean? Well, we don't know, but it works. Okay. And the Bene Gesserits are a similar vein. Like they were like, you know, we made the prophecy by running around these different planets and making these manipulations and stuff, up to and including convincing the Emperor to send his fucking private army to go help you out, so that everything could, like, talk about a risk, right? These guys are like the fucking Spartans, you know, like 300 Leonidas' Spartans, right? And they send them to this planet at the hopes that somehow Paul and Jessica aren't going to get killed in this coup, you know, in this, or genocide or whatever you want to call it, because they basically wipe out this family, right? You know, but that's how the Bene Gesserits work. You know, they've got the voice and they can send people to manipulate and set up a culture for hundreds of years, because that's what they do, you know. Anyway, sorry. So some of the world crafting is pretty interesting, but some of the parts that I find more interesting, like they just are, you know. So they don't get explored too much.
I think it's super cool how in the movie, and this probably comes from the books, but I didn't get that far to get the full feeling of it. And he tries to do something similar in the 1984 version too. Is how they're all human, but how unique each faction or people are, and how for Darkonans are bald or orange hair in the 84 version. The Atreides has a look to them and a culture to them. They all have all these people like the Bene Gesserit, and there's this feeling of, especially with the Bene Gesserit, right, where they're basically doing eugenics the hard way.
Right. It's the year 23,000 and they're still like setting up arranged marriages, and, you know, I mean, there's still a little bit, there's like some advanced technology or something going on there, because like the Bene Gesserits are only supposed to have daughters, right? Like that's their whole thing with Jessica, and, you know, that men get killed by their drugs, because that's what it was in the 60s. Everything was drugs, right? But there's obviously like some manner of control, because Jessica didn't follow that plan, and that's why she had a boy. You know, that's why Paul exists. But but you're right. Like it still is literally arranged marriages and shit. Like Jessica is with Leto, on purpose. That was by design. And like I think even in the book they discuss like, you can know about your family history, but we kind of prefer you not, because what if we want to marry you off to a cousin or another close relative, because we decide that's what's best for our plan. So like that's part of them getting rid of their their history and their backstory and whatever, so that they have complete control of the pieces on the board, more or less. But
I really like in the 2021 version how all encompassing and kind of scary the Emperor seems so far in that movie, versus when I then watched the 1984 movie, how fucking nut he is.
Yeah.
So that's a very big shift, and the 2021 version is more faithful to what I managed to read in the book, versus the 1984. That's not the impression I got from the parts I read so far. I feel like they made a very different choice there. That might be because it gets revealed later on in the book that basically he is not nearly as scary as he seems.
Yeah, I mean, what's occurring to me now, and maybe the director's gonna contradict or inform here, that's fine, but like what occurs to me is like part of the story though, right, is kind of dealing with the difference between like the legend and the person themselves, right, where it's like when the Emperor's people act, he has complete authority and he has decreed it, and therefore there's this direction and whatever. And then you see a little bit with like Harkonnen behind the scenes, like Baron Harkonnen, right? Where it's like, even in the books, like he quibbles with his mentat, but you don't really see a lot of that in the movie. You just see him running around being a creep and being, I guess, like, I don't know, whatever. I was going to say a badass, but that doesn't really convey in the movie either. He's just there, and he's in a couple of important scenes and whatever, but they really did kind of like steal that character, a lot of his personality versus the book, in my opinion. But like,
toned him down.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of the thing, is like you get to the Emperor, right? And it's like there's all this decadence and there's all this, lack of empathy, in comparison. Like, and again, I'm using Baron Harkonnen to kind of like amplify some of those signals, right? He's got Leo Atreides there, literally fucking naked, paralyzed, and gloating while he's eating and stuffing his face, right? That is not the same kind of, plotting, conniving badass that you would think if you didn't have him on screen, because he sent his Harkonnen armies plus the Sardaukar plus all this other political maneuvering, right? There's a difference between like what the dude affects and like his actual presence. And I don't know if it's on purpose, but that certainly seems to be a recurring thing in Dune, is that, like even with Paul a little bit, it's like, you've got the legend and he's literally the Messiah. Or in the books, the director's interpretation, for example, is that he's a whiny 15-year-old, because who isn't a whiny 15-year-old, And so like you've got these weird contrasts, I
want to explain my former point. It was a bad choice of an opening because you don't get to understand the character, because your first impression is the whiny, petulant defensiveness. But if you had a moment of meeting him in another setting, which they did in the 2021 version, then you give him the grace of being defensive when he's supposed to be. It was a bad first impression.
See, and it's funny because I think we're just saying the same things about different characters at different times, right? Awesome. Like, where it's just like, I mean, I'm trying not to be the whole like, Jessica cried, therefore she's weak, but I really did not get that interpretation whatsoever from the books, right? And maybe some of that's my background coming through and just, preferring like a stoic nature in general versus like, literally doubled over from anxiety. Those could not be further from being on the same field in my mind. Whereas like Paul absolutely is a whiny 15-year-old, right? Like, I mean, think about it. Even like Luke Skywalker, right? He's fucking angst, personified in the late 70s, early 80s, especially on Tatooine, right? But he's literally the chosen one, right? So it's just like, I don't know. Context is important. How they, sell them and whatever is important. But
I think Paul's character in the books, what I've read, and also what happens in the 2021 movie, I don't think the actor is bad. He actually seems quite good, but I think
Right.
the character is rather one note mostly. You can tell it's kind of based on an old chosen one fantasy kind of trope, and I don't think there's as much depth to it. But I do think in another that they showed that the depth and the nuance that is there very well. Like Alex brought up, like those things like telling his friend about the dream, not the mother, etc., etc. I actually kind of liked to the Baron. I think he plays it well, but I feel like he also got toned down too much. I really liked in the books. Actually, that's the best part I read so far. Is almost the banter between his mentat and him, and also it seems clear in the books that the Harkonnen has a goal, but really the brains and who makes it all happen is the mentat.
Right.
And I like how uppity the mentat is because he knows he's completely indispensable. In the books, and he's very stoic in the movie.
Yeah, the Harkonnen mentat, I forget his name, right?
Hyder de Price.
Yeah. So, can you elaborate a little bit more on? You're saying Paul is like one note. Like, what are you seeing at that point?
I mean, I just think in the books, to the point I've read, I think they only just got to Dune.
Okay.
There's just he's just pretty standard, right? I'm a little angsty. I'm a little teenager. There isn't really a lot. I feel there's not a lot to him.
Sure.
I do think what there is to him from and more is brought out pretty well in the movie. But I think he's almost one of the weaker characters in Dune compared to many of the others. But that also might be the actors because for example, the guy who plays Duncan, what's his name, Aquaman.
Jason Momoa.
He oozes, like charisma just comes off him in waves, right? He's super likable.
Until his beard comes off. What was that about? Sorry, I'm fine. When I saw him bald, I was like, "What the hell is that?" So.
But I mean, that's also an attention to details. He can't have a beard and wear the still suit properly.
Okay, that's the best explanation I've heard so far. So, but because it's like you see him, especially when they're on
Stilgar has a beard, so I don't fucking know.
That also true, but at least his is close cropped, whereas like Duncan's literally fucking bald at one point, and like, did they recast him? No, wait, that is him, isn't it? No, but it's just funny because he has his signature look, right? And then they cut to another scene, and all of a sudden he's bald, and it's like, what the fuck?
That's how much it matters to him. For him to do the character properly, he shaved his beard.
Yeah, character acting at its finest, right? So,
Speaking of majestic beards, and also one of the best castings in this movie is Oscar Isaac as Dorito.
Fantastic. I love the character work they did in the 2021 version because, like, another one of the things that they did that deviated from previous versions, including the book, is in 2021 they had that ceremony, which was not in the book, but I love the just the kind of extravagance of it and showing and like the weight of the political everything. But there's also that moment that Leto looks over and he looks at Paul and Paul nods. Not that Paul can change anything in the decision. He's just the son. Right. He's not officially important. Everything's already in the works. It's already been decided. But Leto still wants to make sure he's okay with it. And that shows so much of both their relationship and that Leto cares about other people's counsel. And then again, when they were walking on the cliff and Paul wanted to go ahead to try to protect Idaho on Arrakis, and they had a conversation, and you don't get to see that in the book ever. You don't get to see them being like father and son right there, but they put that in the movie, and I would think that was so important and such a good decision.
They build the relationship so much better. You feel so much more compelled for Paul's revenge. Yes. Because you care about their relationship so much more.
Right? Yeah. Well, and it's also a huge foil versus the Harkonnens, right? Every time you see the Harkonnens in their private areas and they're plotting, you see something gross or you see something industrial, right? Because it's like, well, we're here around this vet where I'm recovering, or we're here around whatever. I can't remember like the first scene where you see Rabin and the Mentat and the Baron all talking, right? Where Rabin shows up, after they leave, and how could he take Arrakis from us?
It's like some sort of steam chamber or something.
Yeah, steam bath.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. And so you've got that contrasted then with the Atreides, and they're just, well, we paid grandfather a visit at his grave, and we're just strolling through these green fields, and there's just it's always been so much more that like the Atreides are like the protagonists in a way, right? But they actually get set up with like all of those subtleties that make them, you're compassionate for them, and their history matters, and all of these things, where the Harkonnens are just like industrial, like strip mining, the lack of compassion and everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly subtle. Like, you get to see Caladan, and you see like you see Norway of all the water and the mountains and the trees and all, like, this is good. All of the things that say this is good and healthy. And then you get to Gedi Prime, and it's at night, and it's super industrial, high sci-fi, like all the dystopian, all of the things of bad. And then you see bald people, and like what you can see of Baron Harkonnen at that moment in the steam bath. It's like, how fat did they make him? It was like the first time going through, it was like this question of what is he going to look like exactly? Right. I love that tension that they gave.
There's also very much a what's his name from Apocalypse Now vibe to it, isn't there? And that, especially that scene. What's his name? The guy who's in the Godfather. The Godfather.
Marlon
The Godfather.
Brando?
Yeah. There's like this, like how he's like sitting there. He's like, oh, and he's rubbing his head, and like that's like straight out of the fucking Apocalypse Now.
I thought the visual most people are talking about is the ascending up from the slime, right? Is what,
okay.
That's a cool visual. I just remember thinking when I saw that, I think it's in the steam part where he sits and he does this thing, he touches his head and stuff, and it's just very Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
I kind of liked the over the top one, 1984, but it was too over the top. The Baron, and I almost feel like the Baron is a little too subtle in the 2021. That's like
so 2021 he's going for that like creepy, unsettling, uncanny valley a little bit, which I think is a good choice. In 1984, he seemed kind of dumb because he was so loud. And the moment after,
the thing is, he is kind of dumb.
Well, then he's a bad villain.
Yeah, but his mentat is the brains, right? He just got like this. He just knows what he wants, and then the mentat makes it happen.
But they talk about it, like they talk about it even briefly in the book. Like obviously the mentats they're literally living computers, right? That's their whole thing. But even the mentat acknowledges that the Baron is pretty smart for most people, right? That like if you went back to the time of when they had computers, you're smarter than any of the computers that they had. You're just not a mentat, That's like, yeah. So that again, didn't read very much of the book again on the reread, but that's pretty fresh from yesterday, where it was just like, but their banter too. The whole like I'm indispensable. It's like, yeah, but I'm going to strangle you to death one day, right? It's just like fucking kill you. But yeah. And I wish we got a little bit more of the characterization from the mentats, right? Like even Thufir, like he's such a character when he's on screen. It would have been great to have him, and what you were talking about with the ceremony, just having the little bit of world building where it's like, how the fuck? Yeah. How much did they spend on this anyways? Like,
I had completely forgotten about the mentats entirely. It's been a long time since I read the book. Right. And when watching the movie, I was like, who is that guy? How did he able to do that? All that stuff in his head? That was crazy math.
Right.
That's a great show don't tell moment, by the way. Yes. How like these guys with the lips, they're really smart. They do an eye thing, then they can do stuff. You don't really need to get it explained. In
the 2021, because it looks like a tattoo or something. Like it is deliberate and it is of a station. But like in the book, they say the mentats, you know them by their red lips. In 1984, it's just a smear of lipstick that is like misplaced. It was not.
It's supposed to be
intentional.
I don't know if that's the same in the books because they don't explain it in the books, I think. At least not what I read. But in the 1984, you actually get it from like a rhyme almost that he's saying, the mentat for the Harkonnens. They get that stuff down here from a liquid they drink, which is what is part of their mentatness.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of a question of costume design. Like, are you going to make it look like he forgot to take his lipstick off? Or are you going to make it this is a part of his position? His official,
Right.
like, I succeeded, I graduated, here's my tattoo. Yeah. And I did really enjoy Through Fear, after the Hunter Seeker almost killed Paul, and he was trying to submit his resignation, and Leto says,
Right.
"No,
Damn your honor!"
Go find the people who tried to kill my son." It was such a good moment of showing Leto being angry and like kind of a certain amount of vengeance on his side, but also accepting and forgiving.
But he also cares for his people, right? Like the same thing with the rescue thing. Damn the spice, you know. You want absolution? Go catch me some spies. You know, just it's such a great, like, quick moment, but very important and powerful. And, you know,
they did such good work with the characters. I especially think so with Dr. Kynes. Like in the book and in 1984, it was a man, but they changed it to a black woman, and I actually think it was a great decision, if only because she has the perfect energy for it.
Yeah, she's so great. Like the whole time I've been watching her, and I'm like, what do I know her from? Like, I feel connected to her somehow, like just like as a character or something. And I think I get like Rosario Dawson vibes a little bit from her is part of it, because like I look through her IMDb and I'm like, I'm not really sure I know any of these movies, like not enough that I feel like I should be, you know, getting those kinds of like nostalgia or whatever. But she's such a great character too, because she's got a kind of strength in the thing. You know, Leto just goes off on her after the rescue, and you see what they did, and like he's throwing a fit because he's everybody knows they're screwed, right? But he's using this one minor example as like, you know, the linchpin of his entire argument, and she's like, yeah, but that's not my job here, bummer. You know, she just doesn't react at all, and she's just like, well, the Emperor commands that I'm blind, so bummer.
Yeah,
you know,
she's smart enough to be able to, like, it was just old, and you can't prove otherwise. She walks the political line as she needs to, but she had a certain kind of like grace or energy of everything that had a weight to her, and she was paying attention. In 1984, it was played by Max von Sydow, who is, I think I'm saying his name right. He's a very successful British actor. He's all the good things, but it was just a bad performance, and I don't think it was any one actor's version. Like, there was something wrong going on in there, because like the moment when he was trying to inspect the still suit, and then Gurney Halleck was trying to defend him, it was just comically bad pacing, acting, coordination, all of it. But it had the weight that it was supposed to, with her calmness trying to inspect and Gurney Halleck being overprotective in 2021. Yeah. When they said the prayer after seeing the worm take the spice harvester, it just seemed like this weird line that no one was paying attention to in 1984, but it actually felt like a prayer to her when they were watching it. And they did the really cool cinematic thing of seeing her eyes through the window, because it was the bright through the dusty darkness, and such good visuals.
Those are all great points, but I just took a 90-degree turn because I figured out where I know her from finally. She was fucking in Waters of Mars. Like one of my two favorite Doctor Who episodes of all time. Like Waters of Mars and Blink are what got me to finally watch Doctor Who. And so anytime someone's like, oh, I don't really find it accessible, blah, 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 I tell them to go watch Waters of Mars and Blink, because that's what got me hooked. And it's 2 quick episodes, right? And they're fantastic. She's one of the main, like, I don't know, blueberries, NPCs, whatever. She's one of the main people that's like at this place. And like because you get a lot of moments with her face. And that was the part where it was like, her features like are somehow distinctive enough. The other thing that I knew her from, but I didn't know I know her, kind of like I didn't realize that Leto was Poe Dameron until like 10 minutes ago. But anyway, she's the same way, because she's in Rogue One. She's the senator in Rogue One that keeps telling people, oh, we can't go to war, we can't do whatever. Yeah, she's that senator, you know, on Yavin 4. But that's not where I knew her from, right? Because she's wearing the cowl, and it kind of like hides her features a little bit. But it was Waters of Mars. That's why I'm getting the nostalgia feel, because, you know, that's a old episode by now. So some of you guys were still in diapers. Not really, but it's been
I'm
a
still in
minute.
diapers.
So yeah, but you've gone around the other bend. Like, yeah, you're on the old side, but at least you connect with your kid there.
The 1984 Dune was really trying to. I felt like it fell into the trap of trying to be a direct adaptation of as much as you can get on the screen, while also having a very deliberately weird aesthetic, even for the 80s, even for
Right.
like post. I'm pretty sure that's post Star Wars trilogy, isn't it? Like,
No, it's concurrent, I think, because they Lynch
84. Yeah.
Lynch chose not to work on Return of the Jedi to do Dune.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Return
Well,
of the
no,
Jedi came out.
Return of the Jedi was 83, and this was 84.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, it's basically the same time as the last as Return of the Jedi. And
no wonder Lynch is so salty about that. Holy shit, man! Like
the effects in this in the 84 Dune are terrible. But what I see what Lynch is trying to do? He's trying to do this weird body horror Eraserhead stuff, especially with Harkonnens. He's trying to do this as faithful adaptation in terms of literal words and content and themes and depth.
Like
and that's what it starts with.
The thoughts you can, like the voiceover thing, which does not work.
Oh, but Lynch is doing it because he's super experimental, right? I think with the new Dune, I love that it cuts all that out. It's just the visuals. It's just the a lot of environmental storytelling. It cuts out a lot and lets the actors perform it. And that's kind of
hire good actors and let them do what they're good at.
Oh yeah, well,
shocker.
That's like the secret to sci-fi, right? That's what Star Trek does. At least through at least the next generation TNG.
I mean, a general good rule of stories in general. This mostly applies to science fiction, but it does cross over to horror and fantasy in huge ways as well. Is that, the stuff that puts you in your genre is background to the drama or the story that is going on. And so it's a big part of The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead isn't about the zombies. Nobody gives a shit about the origin. Nobody gives a shit about trying to find a cure or anything like that, because that's not what the story is about. It's about the people dealing with each other, dealing with other bastards, and trying to survive. Dune isn't about the Spacing Guild. It's not, I mean, it's kind of about the worms a little bit, right? But it's not, you don't have these like exposition pieces and dissective pieces of like, oh man, I wonder how this ticks. That's not what makes it a compelling story, right? That might make it good world building and some other things, but you run into those things, right? Like in the Lord of the Rings, like the book, The Lord of the Rings anyways, obviously like he has 20 other volumes after that explaining everything. But the Lord of the Rings themselves, they don't quibble too much about how the magic works, where the orcs came from, or anything like that, because what's more important is the story of Frodo and Sam and Aragorn and Gandalf and the people, right? Everything else is the setting.
Well, yeah, so basically it sounds what you're saying is the David Lynch movie has the Dune equivalent of Star Trek technobabble, right? You don't watch the Star Trek to hear about phase inducers and Heisenberg compensators. What you care about is the character drama and the ideas and the situation put forth. And I think that's exactly what the new Dune cuts out. So I love that. It's very elegant. I love and I even put it in the category of boring atmospheric sci-fi and kind of that tongue-in-cheek kind of way.
But that's what I was worried about. No, absolutely. Like there are so many scenes in the new Dune where it's just like, and we cut from that conversation. Like we've obviously been gushing about it, but it's like now we're going to look at the landscape for like 30 seconds too long. Now we're going to, quibble about these minor details, which like are important to the story, but like they're not compelling. Right. And so you get a lot of this stuff where it's like, it's kind of minutia, but I mean, it really is integral to Dune underlying it. It's not necessarily integral to the movie though. Right. And so like, that's where I was kind of like, hopefully it's not too meta. Hopefully it's not too, like old, slow sci-fi, but
this movie was such the perfect I've had this itch that I couldn't scratch for years of wanting this super magic sci-fi, and this movie did it so well. And I love the atmospheric thing they did so much. In a way, I think they did need to lean on that because everyone knows of Dune. I think, even whether they've not read it or if they don't care to read it, but they kind of like they basically know the story. They know fear is the mind.
They know
killer.
the spice must flow.
Yeah. The blue eyes, whatever, and so it's just permeated pop culture so much that they needed to lean on that 60, 70 depiction of sci-fi and do it well and give this is what everyone cared about. And this is why, this is the feeling. And I think they did it so well with all the visuals and especially the music and even some of the extra things that they threw in that weren't in like the book, like the Sardaukar planet. I fucking love that scene. It's so weird. And I have so many questions. Yes. Yeah. And like the throat singing sound and like the weird Catholic, I'm gonna like baptize you in blood, literally, that from the people who are upside down crucified back there. And no idea. That conversation did not necessarily need to happen on that planet, but the effect of doing all of that atmospheric work with that one tiny scene was so important. Of like, these people are scary, and now I have that sensation.
Right.
And
and it's funny because like that was my main thing adding to the chat, right? Was like some of the political intrigue, well, most of the political intrigue kind of gets cut from the movie because it's just like we don't have time, and it's not necessarily going to make a compelling, movie to just sit there and watch some of this stuff. But like in the book, they make such a big deal that the Sardaukar need to be in Harkonnen uniforms because obviously we can't implicate the Emperor in literally directly helping us. And then the movie, they're like, we're fucking Sardaukar, woo! And it's just like, that is not, no. But it works. I'm not saying
like trumpeting their presence, but I think it was important.
They're in white uniforms.
They have the blood on them.
The second they come down, the Atreides
exactly
was like,
who they are.
Sardaukars! They are wearing Sardaukar uniforms.
Right.
Well, but there was the question of like, how do you know they were Sardaukars? Like, I could tell. By that,
yes, what my ultimate point was is like that's technically a criticism. Like it's not like a direct lifted from the book or whatever. But like Duncan says, like you pretty much know anyway. Like you pretty much know as soon as you cross blades with them that they're Sardaukar, right? And so it's one of those things that they did for the audience again. So that you don't just be like, wait, why are these Harkonnen soldiers suddenly so badass compared to the other ones? Though they're all
and I think it was a little bit of a tell of like, you see their armor and here's the weird blood thing. And then like you see the armor again and they're very vicious. So, like it is important for the audience to get that because there was enough of a discussion of the Emperor has said, I will not hear anything. I will not see anything. I will not say anything of what's going on this planet. And the Emperor is directly going to help you, but let Paul and Jessica live. They did do a lot of explaining of the help and the political stuff.
Right.
But just giving a little bit of a tidbit. Yeah, here's a thing so that you can make sure you understand. I think that was a good choice. And I really love that battle scene of like the coordination between the Harkonnens and then you see the Atreides do a different type of coordination. They are all in sync with each other, more or less. And then the Sardaukar coming from the background. I love that moment.
Go ahead.
Okay. I really think that both it's kind of jarring in a way because they're presented as the most badass warriors. And their trade is also supposed to be really good. It's not that. And Duncan is mentioned by name as, they have Duncan Idaho. He's a goddamn legend.
Yeah.
But still, he takes on a lot of fear-inducing Sardaukar who's supposed to be like absolutely the best as well. And he takes a lot of them, which felt a little jarring that he could take so many of them.
Duncan Idaho, like Paul Atreides, very much approaches Mary Sue though. So I mean, we discussed this with Cody in the chat, right? So to bring up my best friend, but no, he doesn't pay me enough to say that. But anyway, but like Duncan Idaho like becomes a thing, right? Like he's literally a legend in his own right, but his legend almost entirely is about how good he is as a warrior, right? And so, like, I think that was kind of your scene. But yeah, like just in comparison, it's like, imagine you're watching 300 and, the Spartans are just being total badasses. And then this like one Persian guy kills like 50 of them and he just like cuts his way through and whatever. Like, I mean, he's a total badass and I'm glad he gets his moment, but I would have preferred a little bit more build up, and stuff like that. But it's like you only get so much time in a 2.5 hour movie. And that's why I'm like, man, 2 parts is great, but it needed more. So
I don't remember how much of a buildup there was in the book either. It was like he's there and then he's dead. And but I think they did a decent job with the movie of like, this was the thing that Paul was afraid of. He had the dreams of his friend dying. He didn't want that to happen. He wanted to go to Arrakis ahead to help him. And when he saw everything in the same tunnel, and he saw that he was closing the door and locking them in, Paul was hysterical, really.
Right.
And that allowed it to give more weight in the fact that they were still trapped even after he was supposedly dead, and Idaho got up and he kept fighting to give them the time to, like, he made his death count. He knew what he was doing. He was happy to do it. And Paul,
the salute, just like the whole everything.
Yeah. And they did a decent job of letting that death feel like something versus I think I kind of forgot it in the book.
Sure.
I don't remember his death in the book, and that's why I was trying to re-listen to it, but it's gone in my memory.
Right. Well, and the other thing about the Sardaukar that we only got like a tiny taste of, I think, in the movie that I imagine is going to play out a lot more in part 2 is the fact that so the Sardaukar are horrifying, terrifying, total badass monsters, right? They are the elite. They're the Emperor's fist, basically, right? The Fremen make them look like pansies too. And so you get some of that because like most of what you see is in one of Paul's premonitions. So it's not necessarily explained what's going on there. And they actually do have the more book accurate still suits that are, sand camouflaged, and they literally pop out of the ground like daisies. But sorry, I had to get that reference in there. But,
I thought that every time too.
Yeah, right. But they basically just like as scary as the Sardaukar were, right? Like it didn't bother me at all in the first time that I saw it, but the second time I saw it, I was like, the 2 times you see most of the Sardaukar are when they basically execute a cheeky flank on House Atreides. House Atreides phalanxed up. They're being total badasses. They're going to hurt those Harkonnens. And they were starting to push them back. And then the Sardaukar are like, we ghosted down with our levitating jetpack things. And then we flanked you. And I'm like, that's not badass. That's tactics. Like anybody could have done that. The Harkonnens could have done that. And then the second time we see, Duncan Idaho just kill like 30 of them.
Which is supposed to be like a legendary feat, to be fair.
Yes, right. But that's where I'm saying like we needed a little bit more to set up how important that was, right? Because it's like that one we know was important, but like we didn't actually see the Sardaukar be scary. We just saw everybody be afraid of them.
They are,
I
would say.
And so yeah, like all there, I'm in, I get it, and whatever. But also, then we're gonna see the Fremen basically treat them like small children in the next movie, I imagine, and then it's just going to be like, oh yes, weren't we so terrified of you 5 minutes ago?
I think like with the political discussion, I think the point of the movie and its the story anyway, and its politics, it's supposed to kind of show and be critical of politics and maneuvering and technology and empire and all that. So I think kind of the reason why a lot of the politicking wasn't there was like I don't know if you ever read the book The Princess Bride. There's a whole section which got removed because all it was boring satire on how pointless politics are. So that's a joke William Goldman puts in his book that he writes. He's writing the good parts version. He cut that part out because it's boring politics. And I wonder if, because the point of the politics in Dune is that you get betrayed and it's pointless and it's stupid, the point is you want to emphasize you get betrayed more than you want to emphasize politics. Likewise, with the Sardaukar, they're supposed to be badass guys, but Duncan. The point of them is that Duncan Idaho is that much more, and I think you get that without knowing that they're so great, just by showing he's got the Fremen spirit and the Atreides spirit, and sure he dies, but he dies a glorious death, fighting off 30 immortal warriors, killing them all, whatever. So I think that's the point. And I think we also.
We also think we also get shown how badass kind of the Duncan and what's his name Gurney and like the whole the way the Atreides fight and all is, Paul beats this Fremen pretty damn easily, and he has to fight in from a very vulnerable position in the duel, right? He's not used to fighting without shields. He's used to fighting people with shields, which means you go in for a slow attack. Here they're fighting very fast. They're fighting very different, but he bests this guy pretty easily. He has him by the killing blow like 3 times before he actually goes through with it.
Right.
His mother is shown to be a complete badass as well. Here, when the first fight happens.
Oh yeah, because she bests Stilgar.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, maybe I was a little hasty. Like, you didn't tell me you were a weirdie. Yeah. We were just talking out of our ass. We didn't mean anything by it. Yeah, it's such a funny like shit move on his part, but it's not a criticism. Like, it's a great scene, but it's just you are definitely on your back foot and on your ass right now. And tell me again how incapable I am. So yeah.
Another thought or question that arises from that scene is kind of, so the strongest leads, she beats him, then the other guy challenges and she has a champion because she's like I guess the word I'm not sure of, but it boils down to she's a woman / she is, a Bene Gesserit.
She's a Sayadina. She is the
Bene
Gesserit.
Gesserit, for their word. Yeah.
Sayadina means something like close to God or whatever. So it's like it's a low level priestess when I went and looked it up, because it's another one of those. The
Fremen have their own version, and spoilers for part 2 if you don't know anything. Like, that's what Jessica becomes.
Right.
And Stilgar recognizes, whether he just knew it because of the politics that he is keeping a chance of or whatever, but he knows that she is one of them. You don't fight one of them religiously, so that's why she couldn't defend herself.
Right.
So, but my thought is just that does this mean now that their Seath, that's what they're called, right? Seaths, is led by his mother and by extension by Paul now because they won, and he was the leader before?
It's kind of yes and kind of no, because like from what I remember in the books, like there's so much more, like because they're still considered outsiders for a real long time, because like once you go to the Siege, then you start to understand, like they barely touched on how important water was to them and why they kept being like, we need the water of their bodies. Like, the only thing that you can give us is water. The spitting, all of that stuff is very much not touched on in the movie, but it's very, very much important. And the fact that they bound up Jamis, right? Or was it Yamis? I'm like, it was hard J or soft, but anyway, but they bound him up to take him because almost certainly, like, it might get cut from part 2, but if they want to stay true to the book, they're going to dump his ass in a vat when they get back to the Siege, right? Mm-hmm. Because they basically have these recyclers where all of the kills and all of this whatever, they get dehydrated so that they can get the water, because that's how the Fremen stay alive. And water for them is like gold pressed latinum in Star Trek. Like, it is the absolute currency,
Yeah,
that's a thing that doesn't make sense to me. Is the water thing?
Why?
Is because there has never been rain on the planet, right? How much? That's what I feel like. That's what's presented.
Do you want to go into the deep lore, or you want to talk about Dune? Yeah.
I just thought about it when I was watching the movie, because I also in the 1984 version have these big reservoirs of water. And I was just thinking, water would have to evaporate and then come back down for this water to come back constantly. Otherwise, they would just run out of water at some point on this planet.
Kynes mentioned that there's water deep underneath the sands, and there was the ecological effort to try to bring the water up and therefore make paradise and turn all of the sand to greenery. But they stopped that because they wanted to fund the spice. So there is water there. It's hard to get to, and it's easier to recycle dead bodies and your own waste than to
and
get
the still
to
suits, like literally the entire point of the still suits. Like Kynes even says it in the movie, like, when worn properly, you will lose less than a thimbleful of water a day, so highly efficient, like even the tent, right? Like, they again mention it very briefly when Paul and Jessica are hiding in the tent, is that the tent is capturing all of the water that you're breathing out and is basically dripping into a recycler that they're then drinking, right? So like everything on Arrakis is just hyper efficient. That's one of their technological, we're in the 30th century type things, but yeah, like there's more to it, and that's the thing, is like the movie just like it's just kind of background, but it's vitally important, of course, to Arrakis. The part that I thought was funny was like Stilgar basically being like, what does getting back to Caladan do for us? It's like, shit, how about I drop 8 billion gallons of water from Caladan and it wouldn't even be a drop in our oceans? Like, that's what it means to you.
Right, there is a thought that maybe she could have offered that, but the way that he just like, she says, if when you get us to Caladan, we can give you a lot of prizes or something. It's like, what more can you give me than the water in your bodies right now?
That's the scene where I was like, wait, 8 billion gallons of water. How's that sound?
Could be.
I thought
just
it was
also
weird that
the amount of cynicism.
It's not mentioned that they bring any water from their home planet, which I kind of figured they would.
Right.
That would be worth a lot.
Actually, I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure in the book it's discussed where
I don't
the
think
Atreides get their water. Just that they are so rich in comparison, because you have the thing with the palm trees, right? And the palm trees, what struck me, like that was another funny moment the first time I watched it. The palm trees have been around long enough that the Harkonnens had to have planted them, or at least allowed them to do it. But they burned them when... Yes, so as a symbolic victory, to show you just how badass we are, we burned our own fucking trees. That's how monstrous we are. Like, there was one of those where it's like, I get the symbolism, but kind of funny. But the fact that they've got... But, what, to burn them?
Not necessarily to burn them, but that's what he tells Rabban. You must squeeze them, get everything out of them, and crush them. Essentially, that's Harkonnen's plan.
Yeah, but that's like,
but it's their trees
anyway.
They planted them. They took care of them.
So the original point that I was making is the fact that they have I forget whoever, the gardener or whatever his face was, and basically talking about there's 100 dudes worth of water per day tied up into these trees. And it's just very much to kind of show you in comparison, like the Fremen subsist on a thimble full of water a day, sort of in comparison. And then you got literally the 1%, but they're not talking about the 1% because these guys got spice and they got 10 million septums or whatever their currency is, and the Solaris and whatever some of the other stuff was. But they're the 1% because they're sitting on water. They got a fuck ton of water, but we just don't know where or why or anything like that, because I think in the books / in the 1984, like they kind of make a big deal that the Harkonnens are like sitting on reservoirs, right? But they don't really discuss it with the Atreides, even though the rest of the story kind of revolves around where the Fremen are getting their water and why it's so important to them,
There's supposed to be this Oasis scene that I can't really remember, even though I watched it today, that I read about, but maybe it's just in the books. She goes and finds Paul's mother finds a message from another Bene Gesserit in this big oasis to show just the absurd wealth of their Harkonnens. They have like this oasis inside their building on Dune.
Gotcha.
And in the movie, instead, here they chose to use the palm trees to kind of show that,
so they could burn them for drama.
The cost of water is so important, and Stilgar kind of shows that, especially when it's like, what can you give me more than the water in your bodies right now? Mm-hmm. But the scene when he spits on the table is one of the most iconic scenes of Dune, in my opinion. And they didn't put it in the 1984 version.
I was wondering where you're going. I was like, it's obviously there, so what's the point? Where's the outrage? Oh, yeah.
They didn't put it. That was one of the most iconic scenes I remember from the book. Everyone's like, because that is an insult, of course. And then Idaho said, no, that we thank you for the gift of your water. This is important. And then everyone does it. But also in 2020, the chemistry between like all of the actors, really. But I liked having Gurney Halleck and Javier Bardem on the other sides of each other again. But to not put that in is so absurd that it just stuck with me. And I'm still mad about it.
Yeah.
I thought some of the weird additions that considered how much source material you had, how much you had to cut out to make a 2-hour-ish movie for the 1984 version. I don't know why they added the Harkonnen heart blocks. That's not in the books, I'm fairly sure. Certainly not in the 2021 version.
I didn't remember it, and certainly not being as prominent as it was in the 1984 version. Like, it's like in the future, the duels consist of knives, shields, and whatever the fuck those things are, but they're connected to your heart for some reason. So
And Sting being naked for some reason.
In the future, wars will be settled by purple nurples. So,
and there's also a plot device in the 1984 version that's on the books and not the 2021 version, which is the Atreides have these voice modulated weapons that are new and special and really powerful. Which I'm also not sure why
the whole
they
thing
added.
with the Fremen. Yeah,
I don't remember that from the books. Honestly,
it's so that they can keep.
It's not in the books. I looked it up because I thought it was. I thought it would have been mentioned in the parts I had read already, so I went and looked it up, and it's not there.
So my understanding, to add to this just a tiny bit, is that they actually did pull in some of, I think it's Children of Dune is the next one, into 1984 Dune. I think, is it Dune Messiah? Okay, whatever. Yeah. So they pulled in some of the next book into 1984 to give it a little bit more drama, because I think that's where you see some of the, because there's quite a bit of like the Fremen, taking back the planet and whatever. And obviously there's plenty of fighting in, the Dune books and whatever, but I think some of those scenes take place in the sequel. So like in the next book, but which was also kind of the criticism, right? Is because they didn't even cover some of the important parts of Dune, like spitting on a table. The director's really mad about that still, but then they brought in other stuff, so.
Yeah, I feel like just from what we've seen from the 2021 version and what I've read of the book, there was no reason to add extra stuff to the 1984 version or try to draw from the next books. I feel like there's plenty really cool shit in the book and in the 2021 version. You didn't need to do that. I think I'm happy that the director of the new version realized that.
He made a lot of very good choices, I think.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. I just think it's such a great movie, especially when today I watched the 1984 version and the 2021 version back to back, and oh boy, are they different?
Yeah, they're so different in such weird ways. Like, I don't remember from the book that there was a pug, but in 1984 version there was a pug with the Atreides family. So when they arrived on Arrakis, Leto was holding a pug that was just sitting there being cute, whatever. But then they have a pet, whatever. But Gurney Halleck running into battle with me, and he has the pug in his hand. He has a weapon in one arm and a pug in the other.
You don't understand. That's the royal pug.
And then he disappears.
Probably.
Pug never comes back.
Right. Well, he died in the battle. You inconsiderate.
So don't take the pug into battle. It's so fucking
What was he going to
weird.
Do? Leave him with the Harkonnens? They burned the palm trees. Their own trees.
I mean, Captain Picard was one of the better things of this movie, of the 84 version.
So many decisions were so weird. They did the characters so badly in 1984 that it made me angry.
The acting is generally so atrocious in this movie.
Right. Like the relationship between Jessica and Leto is just okay, you tell me that they're happily in love with each other, but fucking prove it. Like when Leto has this line of "I should have married her" or "I should have married you," that matters. And it's 2021. They made it a thing. Like you get to see them interacting with each other and having emotions.
Glances, even just those little glances, where when it's a big scene for Leto, and he's still trying to make sure he's connected with her, right? Yeah.
The really small things of as they're leaving Caladan and he puts his hand on her neck and it's just a little bit of comfort, and it's important to show those things. When he says that, he says it to her. It is a statement of I should have done better by you. You are my family. All of those political things that he could have by keeping her a concubine instead of his wife.
Right.
You don't need to say those to be able to have the important bit. But in 1984, it was just a monologue of watching Leto walk down the stairs, and he was like, I shouldn't have tried to do all of those political things. I should have just married Jessica, and there's no sense of connection between them. Right. But then when Leto dies, she has a hysteric breakdown in the ornithopter, and she's just completely incapable of functioning, versus when we see Jessica see the signet ring in the tent, she understands that he's dead and he's never getting out. And you see she has to deal with the emotion but then continue being functional. The way that they made her was so good in this movie, but they actually gave their relationship the gravity it needed.
Yeah, there's so many. My favorite part is when they're about to exit out and go on to Dune, and how they just like go to each other, like just take each other's hands for reassurance, and it's just these little things, right?
Yeah.
And they play it well, and it's so weird because a lot of the actors in the '84 version, maybe excepting, a lot of them I've seen with other shit be good actors and be good, but very few of these guys in this movie worked on their own or together. It was I don't know.
There was so many bad decisions made in the '84 version. Although it's interesting too, they made Sting such a prominent thing as Fade Rotha in 1984.
He's removed from the 2021 version.
Yeah, and he's just not there. You don't see him, so he's probably going to be important in part 2.
Fade Rotha's the nephew, right?
Yeah. So Raban is the elder brother. Fade is the younger brother of the nephews.
Oh, okay. Because I had seen some analysis, or maybe it was one of the trivia things that they had kind of combined Fade Rotha and Raban together. Or flipped them maybe. So maybe you're right. Maybe he's going to be in the next one.
Well, they can't put them together as one character.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, they're obviously like fire and water to a point, but yeah, I just because names are hard. Like with Dune and me, like I hadn't quite connected the dots on who Fade Rotha was until just now. Like with Sting and goddamn everybody we're using our fake names now, right? But anyway, but you're right, because like I mean, even in some of the opening scenes, like Baron Harkonnen explains his entire plan to Fade Rotha, and then Fade Rotha like the entire time is bitching and moaning because he's bored because teen angst and whatever. But then they finally get to where all the murders are going to happen. He's like, finally something of substance, or whatever the line is along those lines, But yeah, instead we got Robin.
Well, what's the point of that? Is the point of that just to show, these Harkonnens bad? Because that's sort of we sort of already know that from everything else in the movie, don't we?
Well,
if we're talking about accuracy, like
Baron Harkonnen, he's giving Robin access to Arrakis, and like you will get as much profits out of this thing. Squeeze them as hard as you can, and it's going to make everybody hate Robin, so that Fade Rotha can be the kinder one and have a better ascension, because that's the ultimate plan, because he's the favorite nephew.
Fair enough.
Right.
There is this whole dynamic between the two that I've rather read up on. It isn't really shown in the '84 version either, but it's in the books, I think. It's the fact that Raban is not the favorite Fade is, and he's being set up, and Raban's not, and that they have in the '84 version of the movie, they have two very different, and I would say both pretty impactful fates, things that happen to them, where it's like, I feel like I can see why they're kind of redundant, why they could be one character, except for the fact that both of their fates in the '84, at least, if that's book accurate, are quite impactful. And that's why I'm not sure if you can combine into one character. I don't know if they will introduce Fade in part 2 or not.
I think that, I have the expectation that they will cast someone as Fade, and it's going to be someone who can be very weird and very different from Dave Bautista to try to make that contrast there. So I'm kind of excited to see that kind of chemistry play off each other, like they have in all the other versions. I think there'll be something there. There's a couple other thoughts that I had, specifically to contrast the '84 to the 2021 version that they did very much better. Was part of it was Dr. Yue. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, he's going to be the betrayer, but they allowed him to have a gravitas to him. Like in the 2021 version, he understood his wife was dead. He wasn't under any circumstance thinking that he can get to go fly off into the distance with his wife and have a happy reunion.
He was probably pretty sure, at least,
He knew that he was dead. Leto was going to die, but all you can do is, if you choose the right moment, you can take the Baron with, which is his point. He had they gave him the ability to be competent. In the 1984 version, it was a surprise that, you can go join your wife too, and then kill him. And they didn't even have the Baron kill him himself, but I really like the change that they had Harkonnen be the one to slice his neck, because he's the villain. Let him get that evilness right there. But it was such a good choice to change that, and I don't remember exactly how he was in the book, except for the fact that Yue knew that really bad things were happening to her if she was even still alive.
Right.
I don't remember. I can't remember if he thinks she's still alive, but I do remember the thoughts we get from him from the parts I read is how he feels really guilty about it.
Yes.
Like
Right.
but yeah, I guess he's kind of driven by revenge and a slight hope.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he knew that she was dead in the books. I'm not certain. The other thing was the sense of sabotage that the Harkonnens actually did. In the 84 version, they say like, well, we pulled out this thing that was making the shields not work. Now we can have the shields up. And they just like basically like they're finding bombs in places that had been stashed. But it's so much more insidious, I think, so that it's an economical pressure of they must get spice production, and everything has been not maintenance in years. Everything is old. The desert is killing it
everything
all.
that got left behind.
Yeah, and it's just
Yeah.
like the what was it the officer of the change, whatever they called kinds of like she was supposed to be, but also not supposed to be recording everything to make sure that the handoff was right, and they didn't. And like, that being the pressure, I think is a better motivator than well, we found a bomb in the shield, and then we're not going to do anything about it.
I did enjoy the fact that the meant that he was even like he kind of brings up your point like this is too easy. These were too easy to find. The bombs. He says that in the 84 version.
Oh, I missed that part then.
Okay. Gotcha.
Might have just checked out because it was painful.
I was gonna just add briefly on the UA thing that like in the books he is extremely competent, but I don't remember a lot of his interactions leading up to the thing. But when they're going over the plan with Fate Ratha, they stress the fact that the reason why UA is the perfect double agent for them is that UA was certified safe to the same level that he could literally be the operating physician on the Emperor himself. Mm-hmm. And, Fate Ratha is like, wait, you guys can't break Imperial conditioning. Like, what the hell did you do? And they were like, we stole his wife. Nobody's ever thought of that. And it's just kind of a funny moment in the book in a sick and twisted kind of way. But
they didn't exactly describe the Imperial conditioning and why it was such a shocker that UA was the one who betrayed him.
It's that same kind of world building. It's like the spice letting you see the pathway through stars, right? Like part of like the underlying thing in Dune is like they have such perfect control over people that there's literally like there's humans, as the Reverend Mother calls them, right? As the Bene Gesserit see them, and then there's everybody else, right? And so like only the ruling class people, only the Bene Gesserits, only the Spacing Guild, only the Mentats or whatever, like those guys are the only people of consequence, which just kind of feeds into the bit of classicism you get with the Fremen and whatnot. But like, yeah, the Imperial conditioning, it's like it's just one of those little pieces that it's like we've got perfect control of drugs to the point that we can hallucinate pathways through the stars. We got a perfect control of drugs so that we could do math really good. We've got a perfect control of psychology so that we can literally use the voice like the Force and compel people to do things. And then the Imperial conditioning, theoretically, whatever that means, to the point where like the Hippocratic Oath is like part of his DNA. I don't know, but it doesn't get explained, but it's part of that thing where it's like they have total control over people to the point where they get to decide somehow whether or not you're going to have a boy or a girl when you get pregnant, right? But that's not the important parts of Dune. That's the background dressing. That's the genre, that's the sci-fi coming through. But anyway, we could obviously talk about this for a while. So
yeah,
we can. I mean, I was going to bring up some more stuff, but I don't know if we just want to wrap it up.
I'm happy to continue, but
I should pull the plug at some point. I mean, I'm happy to continue, but I got competing plans today, so.
I'm sure this is going to probably crop up in other discussions in the future anyway. But
especially the palm trees. That didn't impact me at all. So
what happened to the pug?
Yeah.
I did have the same thought, Justin, when I watched it today, actually. One last note I will say, I watched it both in the movies and here at home. This is one of the few movies where I feel like when I watched it in the theater, it was better for it. Often I like just being at home. But this was definitely a go to the movies if you still can kind of movie. It was really good in the theaters.
Right. No, yeah, I mean that it's definitely a recommendation. I mean, if you're into Dune, obviously, if you're into any kinds of older sci-fi and that sort of thing, I mean, it's very foundational, even though I don't feel like it's necessarily got the same kind of mainstream appeal of like, you know, Star Wars or Star Trek or anything like that. I mean, Star Wars lifts very heavily from here as it does from a bunch of other sci-fi, right? I've discovered over the last couple of decades and whatnot, like, you know, Dune and Tatooine pretty fucking close, and you know, have some commonalities there. But yeah, it's great. I mean, read the book if you're into any of the political intrigue, like out of Game of Thrones. Like that was literally my first thought once it started to click. We were getting the plotting and the murder and all of this stuff without all the, you know, unnecessary incest and you know, child rape, in my opinion. So, you know, like.
Oh, you mean you think that's unnecessary for a story?
Yes,
Hot
yes.
take. Hot take.
Yeah, I know, right? I prefer those things never factor into the plot ever. This falls into my category of the similar kind of scene in World War Z where the hero doctor shoots himself in the face because he tripped and shot his gun. Those things might be true to life, but that is not ever part of the story that I am interested in, like ever. So, yes, I've got the hottest of takes. So spicy, table salt and me, but
salt and pepper.
But anyway, it was good. Go watch it,
Yeah.
Cody. I'm sorry, man. I hope you've seen it again, and it to me it was actually better the second time. Like I've definitely found it more approachable and just, you know. Dune is definitely, you got to get to it more than once, and that turns off a lot of people, but I think it's worth it. You know, I think it's absolutely worth it. So
Okay.
Okay.
Okay.